Welcome, everyone. It's afternoon here in Boston. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon for both business owners as well as their advisors. Today we're talking about, are you on track to hit your exit revenue goal? Before we begin, I just wanted to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about the Business Transition Academy, and then I will introduce our guest speaker today. We're so pleased to have Keith Loris with us from Sales Renewal. So I am one of the founders and the president of Business Transition Academy. I owned my own business for 14 years before selling it back in 2004. And having gone through that sale process without a lot of advice, we were able to successfully sell the business. And I worked 3.5 years for the buyer. But what I learned is that there was very little information in the marketplace for business owners on how to plan and execute successful ownership transitions. So I made it my mission after I left the buyer in 2007 to set up my practice to help other business owners through this process. And very pleased to have formed the Business Transition Academy, which is an educational portal for business owners. We have a tremendous amount of content on the website. We hope you check it out. There are white papers, blogs, videos. We've got a training course out there. We have case studies. We'd love you to check out the Business Transition Academy. I also co-wrote a book called Cashing Out of Your Business, Your Last Great Deal with Kathleen Richardson-Morrow. And this book provides an introduction to business ownership transition planning and why it's necessary for owners to plan well in advance. In that book, we find what is called a business ownership transition plan. And our definition of that is that it's a comprehensive written document that outlines how and when the ownership of the business will be transferred to others, either internally or externally, in order to achieve the owner's goals. And we also talk about in the book a 6-step process that we use with business owners in order to help them plan for their transition. And this is the process that we use with owners when we consult with them as well. And there's 6 steps to this process. The first step is getting yourself prepared, because as we found, business owners who have not prepared themselves personally for the transition and have not created a vision for the ideal transition, they find it very difficult to move forward. So step 1 is getting yourself prepared. Step 2 is called counting beans. And this is all about determining how much money you need to net from the transition after taxes and fees in order to live out the rest of your life and achieve your financial goals. Step 3 is called building a better box. And this fits in very nicely with what Keith is going to talk about today. In building a better box, it's all about the company and how to maximize the value of the company. Most owners will need to increase the value of the company before they can exit and achieve their financial goals. Step 4, we call follow the yellow brick road, is all about the owner's options and whether they want to sell or transition internally to key employees or managers or family members or to an outside buyer. Most owners have more than one option, and we cover in that step all of their options and what the pros and cons are of each. Step 5 we call Art of the Deal, and that's all about taxes and advisory fees, and it's also about the process of actually selling your business. Now, if you transition your business internally, that can be a very different process than transitioning it externally, and we talk about both during that step. And finally, in step 6, we call it paint by numbers. This is where owners pull together all that they've done in the prior steps into a cohesive written business ownership transition plan that I just spoke about. And in that step, they're pulling together a written document that outlines, as we said, how and when they will transition their business, whether it's internally or externally, in order to achieve their goals. I'm so pleased today to have Keith Loris with us from Sales Renewal. I found that Keith's model is very different than any other model I've seen in the marketplace. And most of our business owners, as I mentioned, need to increase the value of their business before they can exit in order to achieve their goals. So we're very pleased to have Keith with us today to talk about the topic of his very different model about and what he uses to help business owners increase the value of their company. So Keith currently is the president and CEO of Sales Renewal Corporation. He's adept at leveraging marketing and technology to efficiently and effectively drive leads and sales. And Keith will be telling you about a very interesting model that he's created around taking risk alongside the owner in order to ensure that following his advice, owners will increase their sales. Keith has had a 29-year career. He's held executive sales level positions, marketing, and technology at a number of different technology companies. He earned a bachelor's degree in biology from Vassar and a master's degree in computer science from New York University. So, Keith, we're so pleased to have you today. We're going to turn it over to you and your slides, and then I'll jump back in at the end when we switch over to Q&A.
Thanks very much, Jane. It's a pleasure to be here. So we're going to talk about answering the question, are you on track on hitting your exit revenue goal? All right. We're going to talk about the importance of growing revenue in the years before sale, why it's really quite crucial. It's a piece that sales renewal is kind of new to the exit planning space, and it's a piece that seems to be often missing in the overall exit planning universe. People have an exit planning goal. They need to hit this number so they can live their lifestyle in retirement or, after they sell. But not much can really be offered to how to actually hit my number. And so that's really what this presentation is about. We're going to talk about how you can determine by presenting a framework of whether your current marketing effort is going to do that. Well, it'll hit the revenue number you're counting upon. And then talk a little bit about agile integrated marketing as one of the best ways we have found to actually hit that number. And I'll be honest, a couple of slides at the very end, it's a little bit of a commercial for sales renewal. So marketing return on investment, ROI, I'm sure for this audience, not a new concept. And really the focus here in terms of marketing is you really want to focus on the ROI of your campaign. Marketing dollars are precious. You want to be benchmarking and analyzing, and marketing campaigns that are generating a lower return on investment, the money should come from those, and they should go to marketing campaigns that are generating a higher investment. And there are lots of different ways to figure out the ROI. The lifetime value is an important consideration as opposed to just the initial sale. In certain kind of situations, if it's a very high-end thing, if it's a very high customer acquisition, if there's a lot of repeat sales or it's a one-time buy, a lot of different things. But that's often the best metric. Sometimes that's hard to come up with, though. The challenge is when you look at marketing returns in the public space, the data is pretty rare because if you think about it, it's pretty confidential information how efficient your marketing is. It's also not very actionable, all right, because it's going to be very, very specific and tied to that company, its situation, its history and company position. We have a couple of data points here, though. Nielsen has published some kind of modest returns of, for every dollar invested in marketing, $1.09 to $2.10 return. Nielsen, the TV rating company, that's more traditional media. Another firm called Web Strategies claims that $5 is considered a strong return for every buck invested in marketing. Our own internal data, we have clients ranging from $3 to $37 per marketing dollar invested. The graph on the right is an example of that better case, where this is a business-to-business client. It was benchmarked over 2.5 years. This client has our own sales force, so the marketing goal here is to generate leads for the sales force to close. So we benchmark ourselves in terms of leads, not sales. Other situations where we're helping with the close, like an e-commerce site, we benchmark with sales. But over the 2.5 years, we grew their leads 87%. At the same time, we reduced their cost 42%. And so, yes, leads up, cost down, and that's a lot of what we'll talk about later on with agile marketing. And the return on the average dollar invested was pretty good at 37 bucks. So to make the argument about why this is so crucial, growing revenue before the sale, we have this little hypothetical scenario. Over the course of 3 years before the transaction, the company has increased its marketing investment 150, then 150, then 200K. And this is on top of whatever their budget was. So we're talking about incremental costs here. And we're going to assume a very modest return. We're actually starting with only $2. We're imagining we're getting better in the subsequent year, so it grows to $3 return, and then finally a $4 return. So that translates into the change in revenues you see. So over the course of the 3 years, the company's invested $450K more, and the annual revenue increased $1.4 million. So the ROI for the company's investment was 222%, a pretty good return. If you then take that revenue and you subtract out a typical gross margin, subtract out typical overhead, you come to EBITDA of 580K. If we assume the business ends up being sold at a 5 multiple of EBITDA, the sales price will have grown by $2.9 million. So the company invested $450K, and the owner walks out in his or her pocket with $2.9 million more after 3 years. It's a pretty fantastic ROI from our perspective, and it's one of the reasons why, as a company, Sales Renewal has gotten very interested in this space. Again, we're going to hold some questions for the end, so if you have them, hold them. So now we're going to talk about, well, we're going to hit our number, and how's a way to think about whether we're likely to hit our number. So we're going to start with, I love this little cartoon. I'll give you all a minute to read it. It's often a shock for a lot of small businesses to realize that the U.S. Small Business Administration talks about investing 7 to 8% of revenues in marketing for a typical small business. All right. We have yet to meet a company who's doing that, but you're going to see that's a pretty important metric right here. So we have this proprietary analysis that incorporates 5 factors to answer the question, what percent of revenue should be invested in marketing? So it takes into account, are you marketing to businesses or consumers? Are you selling services or products? It's very heavily weighted also by your competitive situation. So the third element there is your industry competitive. Is this a not very competitive industry to a really super competitive, electronics online, where a 10-cent difference on a $10,000 product swings the deal? Then the fourth item is your firm itself. Do you have a weak competitive advantage ranging through strong competitive advantage? And then finally, when you look at your top competitor, are they much stronger to much weaker to you? And each of these is sort of like a 5-level range. And again, the point of this is to come out with a recommended percent of revenue to invest in marketing. So we're going to look at 3 case studies. Again, these are hypothetical. And 3 of them, these 3 factors are the same in all 3. They're all B2B business-to-business companies. They're all selling products. They're all exiting in 3 years. And interestingly, they have the same revenue now and in the past. Okay? What we're going to vary across the 3 scenarios is their investments in marketing, their different exit revenue goals, and most importantly, their different competitive strengths. So case study number 1, and I'm going to walk through this first one in a little bit more detail. I'll go a little faster on the others. So as you can see right here, it's a B2B company. They sell products. 2 years ago, they were $1.6 million. Today, they're at $2 million. They're currently investing $150,000 in marketing, and they're going to be trying to exit the business in about 3 years, 36 months. And at that time, they would like to have $3 million in revenue, and they will have grown their $150,000 marketing budget to $250,000 to support that growth. Their industry is very competitive, and they do not have a strong advantage. They have a weak competitive advantage, and their top competitor is much stronger. They themselves think they got a 70% chance of hitting that $3 million number. Okay? So when we kind of step back and look at that data, we say, well, they have a modest growth goal for the 3 years, and they have a weak competitive position in a highly competitive industry. So at first glance, you'd think, oh, this is not very good. They're unlikely to hit their numbers. But when we run those numbers, we see a couple of things. First off, their past compound annual revenue growth was 11.8%. In terms of what they're projecting for the future, they're projecting 14.5%. So they're actually only projecting a modest increase in their rate of growth, right? It's certainly, their growth rate is consistent with their past performance. If we look at their $150,000 investment for their current annual revenue, they're investing 7.5% today in marketing. And when you do that same analysis for what's going to be the scenario at exit, the $250,000 over the $3 million, you get 8.3%. So not too bad, all right? They're actually increasing their percent of revenue into marketing to support the increased revenue they're counting on. When we do our analysis, though, we come up with a 9.2% level. And that's very much driven by the competitive factor, right? It's highly competitive, their weak position. To break through the clutter, to get yourself noticed, the products need a lot of marketing support of the services, so we've come up with a 9.2% number here. Now, this is marketing. It's not rocket science. So, we have a decimal, but it's really more of a range is the way to think about it. It's probably more like, 7.5 to 10.5% is kind of the ballpark they're talking about. When we look at that number and we compare it to their current, right, they're currently short 1.7%. In other words, we're recommending 9.2, they're at 7.5. When you look at where they're going to be at exit, well, we're recommending 9.2 at exit. They're planning on 8.3, so they're actually only going to be 0.9%, okay? So again, stepping back, the growth rate is consistent with past performance, and they have pretty modest shortfalls in their current and exit marketing budgets versus what we would recommend. When you kind of plot this out, we actually rank this as a 90th percentile. So the client thought 70%, but we actually are more confident, and here are some of the reasons why. If you compare your budget and revenue, okay, you can see consistent, that the two numbers are consistent. I can't push the button, okay. If you compare your budget to our recommendation, you can see they're converging because they're actually increasing their marketing spend a little bit. They're getting a little closer over time to what we recommend, so it's converging. If you look at each month then and you say, okay, so here's what Sales Renewal recommend, and here's what for a spend, what they're actually spending, over time, each month's under investment actually is decreasing, which is a good sign. And then finally, if you take each of those monthly individual underinvestments and you add them together cumulatively, all right, it turns out that they're about 6% underinvestment versus what they're planned, which is a pretty modest underinvestment. They're pretty close to the numbers we'd recommend, and hence the 90th percentile confidence factor. So that's case number one. Case number two, again, has the same kind of revenues and stuff, but in this case, they're expecting to double revenue in 3 years, and they have an average competitive position in a typically competitive industry. So they're right in the middle of that bell curve. Not very competitive, and they're typically competitive, okay? And that's probably where some of this doubling of the revenue came from, or that bullish bet. So they're currently at 2 million. They're expecting to go to 4. When you look at the numbers, they've grown 12% in the past, but they want to grow 26% in the future. So they're actually doubling their growth rate. That's becoming a little aggressive. Now, they're not spending very much, currently marketing 3.8%, and they're actually going to decrease it a little bit. By the time they get to exit, they're going to be at 3.5%. The challenge here is because they're all sort of average, we recommended a slightly higher number, and so they have larger shortfalls, right? Basically, they're 50% short of our number. They're going to spend 2.9% and 3.1, and we're recommending 6.6. So about 50% off the mark from what we would recommend. When you see that graphically, when you look at their budget versus revenue, their revenue is growing faster than their budget. The gap between their budget and what we'd recommend is growing over time, which leads to a monthly underinvestment that's growing over time, which leads to a much larger cumulative underinvestment, 70% as opposed to the 6. So for this scenario, we would say it's more sort of a coin flip. It's kind of 50-50 whether they can hit it. This is a company that's depending on a lot of things going right for them to hit their number. The third case study is, very bullish. They're expecting a 250% revenue growth in the same 3-year period. And it's probably because they looked and said, you know what? We have a strong competitive position, and our industry is not super competitive. We're really standing out. We're very viable, and so we should be able to hit these kind of numbers. The problem is that they were at a 12% historic growth rate, and they're anticipating a 36%, so they've tripled their compound annual growth. They're spending very little on marketing, and while they have recommended doubling it to 1.5%, right, and that's probably gave them confidence, okay, we're doing it. We're going to grow. We're competitive. We're doubling our marketing. The problem is they started out well under the bar. Given this kind of situation here, we'd recommend 3.9%. And so in comparison to case number 2, this company is pretty much 100% short. They're 3.2 and 2.4% short what we'd recommend, and so that's a very significant shortfall, which you can see graphically here. When you compare their budget to the revenue, the budget's staying much flatter than their revenue is growing up. When you compare their budget to our recommendation, it's a large growing gap. The monthly underinvestment each month is large and growing, and then the cumulative over the 3 years is quite large, 200%, right? And so this is a company we would assess at sort of in the 30th percentile of hitting their number. Now you'll notice in all these scenarios, we also recorded the client's self-assessment, and so sometimes we came out more bullish on the client, and sometimes we came out quite a bit less. You know, I know those previous slides, there are lots of numbers, so here's sort of a summary that kind of thinks about it more from a principle perspective. And so the first case study was a company that's really focused on the prize. They had a modest growth goal. They understood they had a weakly competitive position. They could have done a lot less, but they did for their company make a significant investment in marketing, and we believe they're in the 90th percentile of meeting their exit revenue target. The second case was a client who had too aggressive a growth goal. They had an average competitive position, and their problem was their increased investment in marketing was not commensurate with their aggressive growth goal. And that's why they're kind of dependent on things sort of turning their way and having some element of luck. The third example was a company that had a very aggressive growth goal and a strongly competitive position, which we would argue they over-relied on, right? Their competitive strength did not compensate for their very aggressive growth goal and their marketing investment, hence we assessed that 30 percentile likelihood of meeting the goal. So hopefully this gives you a flavor of how this works, and we're quite pleased with how it's working out so far. So that's a way to assess where a company is and where they're going to meet their goal. Let's say, all right, we want to ramp things up. We're not sure. We want to increase our confidence. How could you do that? How can you hit that number? So next two slides, we borrowed some popular trends. The first one is the notion of continuous improvement. It really comes from the world of manufacturing. Some people might have heard of the Deming wheel and the ISO 9000. And these are basically some quality ideas that, for instance, Japan in the 50s and 60s became really a big proponent of. And now it's pretty widely accepted within the US too. And so the Deming wheel, it's a really simple concept. It's a 4-step process. It's a cycle where first you make a plan, then you execute the plan, then you check and analyze, how did you do? How many widgets did I have to throw away, and so on. You adjust your plan, you adjust the machine or what have you, and then you make a new plan and you run the cycle again. ISO 9000 is basically that same idea over time. So you have a moment in time, you do your plan, do, check, act, and you figure out if you adjust the machine a little bit, you have 10% fewer errors. So from now on, the new standard is the machine is adjusted at that 10% setting, and now you do it again. And you realize, oh, if I change some other setting, I get some other improvement. So the idea is you do the same process, but over time, you're improving your quality. That's sort of the manufacturing worldview. In marketing, there's a popular thing called agile marketing. It actually came out of the world of software development. And the key idea there is rapid iteration. In the world of software, if somebody is going to sit down and say, I'm going to create Microsoft Word, right? That's a gigantic program. It's very powerful. It will take them years to produce that program, right? Microsoft itself has been evolving it ever since they were Microsoft. So today, you would never say, I'm going to make Microsoft Word. The idea here is come up with some smaller concept. Let's do a spell checker first, and let's do that. Right? That's simpler. That's more we can get our arms around. And it's the same idea here with marketing, right? You want to, instead of coming out with grand, big strategies, you want to produce marketing concepts quickly. You want to do marketing tests of ideas, get them out into the real world, and then get feedback and improve them and do another cycle. And so it's the notion of continuous marketing improvement. Now, agile marketing isn't just do a lot of little things quickly. A key part of that is the feedback, which in the marketing world is called analytics of big data, right? So you want to vary the subject line in your email, and you want to send out half with one subject line and half with the other subject line. You see which email gets a better response, and that's your new standard for subject lines. And so the next iteration, you tweak the intro paragraph of the email, and so on. That's an example of continuous marketing improvement. So over time, you get better returns from your marketing investment. Now, switching gears a little bit, we'll focus on small businesses. So small businesses have some significant marketing challenges. A couple of them are listed here. The first one is that, unlike sales, marketing is typically not the first hire in a small company. Many of our clients, for instance, have no marketing employees, or maybe one or two or a handful. Maybe it's a part-time resource. The office manager does some marketing on the side or something. The challenge here is that marketing has become highly specialized, very technical, because of the web and analytics and things. And it's also very time-consuming. As a business owner, you're now expected to sit there on Facebook and just type away to random customers, right? So bottom line, it's long past the days when just being a good English degree, a good English major is all you need to be a great marketer. The problem is, even if you do have that part-time person or your small team, even if they are really, really competent in their discipline, it's really impossible for a person or small team to have all the expertise necessary to grow leads and sales, which is what we think the role of marketing is. And you can see that on this slide. You almost certainly cannot see it, but there are 3,874 logos on this graphic. And this is doubled every couple of years. This thing comes out. It's doubled every single time. There are all these different kinds of categories: advertising, promotion, content, and so on. There are lots and lots of vendors. What often ends up happening for the small business owner, when they think about, I want some help in growing my leads and sales, they kind of look out at this marketing space, all this choice, all these decisions, all this time to figure it out. It's sort of a deer in the headlights effect, and things often don't happen. The other challenge is that, okay, well, maybe I'm going to hire the team, but of course, that's really expensive. If we're going to hire a search engine optimization person, hiring a full-time person, that's an expensive thing. I only need them 10% of the week. It becomes very expensive. So because of that, most small businesses don't do this stuff in-house. They rely on outside third parties. Now, we would call these companies single-tactic agencies because they work on one marketing tactic: advertising, public relations, trade shows, direct mail, and so on. And one of the issues there is they all have a vested interest in the solution they sell. So you can see in that graphic there, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And we'll give you an example of that in the next slide. So what we are big proponents of, and this is not unique to Sales Renewal, but we're big proponents of integrated marketing. And that's really from the fact that most marketing problems are multidisciplinary and so require the integration of multiple marketing tactics. So an example we'll walk through here. Your problem is you don't have enough leads coming from your website. The challenge is there's 3, if not more, different ways to solve that problem. You could bring more traffic to your site from search engine optimization, which is getting your site to rank better when somebody's searching in Google for your kind of business, getting it to rank more to the top. Another possibility is you can pay Google for ads, and when they click on an ad, if you pay enough money, they'll put you on the first page, and if they click on an ad, they'll come right to your site. So advertising will bring more traffic to your site. Another way to solve that problem is you can improve your website, make it better at converting visitors to leads. So a visitor gets enchanted with something or other, and they call you, or they submit a form of your website. And that's really the quality of the writing, the design, and so on. The challenge here, given the vested interest nature of this thing, let's say you've picked an ad firm. You want more leads, so you think, I need an ad firm. Most agencies, okay, it would be an unusual one for them to say to you, you know what, don't hire me now. Go take 6 months and improve your website. Hire me in 6 months when the site's done. Actually, today with the economics of marketing, the ad agency might volunteer to improve your website instead, right? But the idea here is that you want somebody you want to take a broad view. You don't want a vested interest, because the answer is which of these approaches is best. The truth is it's probably a mix of all of them. You have to do all of them, okay, in different levels and different degrees, especially when you're going to factor in the ROI. As an example, converting your website, making your website better converting at visitors to leads, that's a one-time expense. You spend some money, you're done, and you get the benefit for 3-4 years until you do your website again. as opposed to advertising where you're clicking every single visitor. You're paying for every single visitor who clicks through. So they all have different economies, and you want to mix them together. Advertising an instant on, instant off. You pay Google money, you'll start getting traffic that day. Search engine optimization, that takes a long time to move up in the rankings. You might work 6 months before you start moving up, right? So you might actually want to interleave the ads at the beginning, and when you're getting more search engine optimized or natural search traffic, you can turn the ads down. So there's complicated things here, but a mix is generally going to be the best approach to this. Big businesses, of course, understand this, and they also have the resources to integrate. They have VPs and directors, they have big data analysts, they have IT people. They basically have the infrastructure to hire, manage, and coordinate lots of these single tactic marketing agencies. The reason why there are not more integrated marketing agencies is because most marketing agencies serve big companies. And big companies are thrilled with hiring an expert in advertising because internally they can sort of project manage and do all these things, right? So this is the case. Silos are not good. They're really destructive for small businesses in particular. So this is sort of an org chart here where, you have the business owner, you have a VP of marketing in quotes, and those sort of 9 different characters are the way that Sales Renewal divides up the 3287 different vendors you saw in the earlier slide. That's way too confusing. So we kind of break it up into these 9 different logical chunks. So for instance, under paid marketing, we would characterize advertising, direct mail, and telemarketing. So the bottom line here is that, marketing today, it's multidisciplinary, it's multi-channel, it's complex. It has to be resourced and managed accordingly. There's no free lunch. If you want to get more traffic, if you want to get more sales, you have to invest in growing your business. What you can do is you can assemble the team and how you're going to do this untraditionally. They don't all have to be employees. As I said earlier, that's prohibitively expensive. So you can have some employees, some consultants, some third-party vendors, maybe an outsourced team, or some sort of mix. But fundamentally, you still need to have people who are focusing on this and think about it in a sort of organized way, such as we're diagramming here. So that's sort of the case for agile integrated marketing. Now we want to give you a little bit more actionable roadmap. So again, that same Deming's wheel we saw earlier, you want to start with a develop, coordinated, integrated plan. You want to do that marketing each month, send out the emails, go to your trade shows, whatever it is. You want to be benchmarking performance and quarterly review that and then adjust the plan based on the data. What's working, what's not. So we're going to focus the next couple of slides mainly on the plan because it's the thing that's most often skipped in small businesses, right? And it's the thing that is often the most time-consuming. It seems sort of indirect. Let me just get out there and do it. And so it's often the most skipped thing. But, there's that saying about measuring twice, cutting once. Ounce of prevention, pound the cure. Lots of little sayings in English about the idea of like making a plan and doing things makes sense. To go back to the earlier example, you want to improve your website before you hire the ad firm, right? That's going to be a much more cost-efficient thing than getting the advertising people coming in and generating traffic through a poorly converting site. So a coordinated integrated marketing plan typically has these 5 steps. You would start with the high-level investment view. So you can determine your financial ballpark. This is the part your CFO, the business owner, is going to be very interested in. Given all my competitive pressures and so on, my growth rates, is this a lifestyle business? Am I looking to sell to a bigger company in 2 years? All these factors come into what the right percent of revenue to invest in marketing. But once you have that number, you now have a ballpark that we're going to try and figure out what's the optimal marketing plan that can comfortably live within that financial ballpark. So the second step is to be brutally honest and do an in-depth self-assessment. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your challenges? What are your competitive positions and so on? And it does not pay to delude yourself. This is brutal honesty is the key here in this step. The next step is to kind of look at your competitors, because the second step is all internally what you think. But you can go and it's astounding how much one can learn when you look at your competitors' websites. All right, now, we're not talking about like technical factors like how long it takes for the page to load, but you can learn an awful lot by the kinds of words the competitors are using, the terms they use, the audiences they sometimes will actually call out, Click here if you're this and click here if you're that. And so you can get a pretty good sense of their marketing strategy by an in-depth review of their website. And that's a way to sort of sanity check your self-assessment. You don't think this market segment is important, but all of your competitors, that's what they're mainly talking about. So that's something you should think about. The first three steps basically are gathering the data that you will then use to come up with the plan. What are the strategies and tactics that make sense for you? So blogging makes sense for me, and I want to figure that out. That should be part of our plan. The fifth and final step is you take sort of the strategic and tactical guidance of step number 4, and you turn that into a specific plan, right? And so, yes, blogging is important to us, but do we want to blog once a week or once a month? Is that an employee, or do we have to find a freelancer? Or are we going to go to a third-party company for that? Do we need to start that in 6 months, or is that 3 years? So that's where the strategy and tactics becomes an actionable plan, a marketing budget that you can then manage to over the course of the year. The plan should answer questions like these, and given the time frame, unfortunately, I can't really spend much time on this, but people are all going to get a thank you for being in this webinar. In that thank you, there's going to be an attachment of this PowerPoint, so you can look at slide 35 at your leisure. But the key point here about the plan is that last bullet. We want to be measuring twice, cutting once. Once you make the cut, it's very expensive to put the piece of wood back together again if that cut was a mistake. The plan is going to define budget levels and levels of effort. So the diagram on the right there is kind of another way to view those same 9 characters we showed you earlier, but now they're kind of sitting around a table, and there's sort of a bar chart in the middle of the table. And so this is a way to show graphically that for this particular company, in-person marketing and trade shows and telemarketing and things like that are important for them. Paid marketing is the next most important. And, this could be a budgetary view. It could also be a team and technology view, right? And so this also will give you guidance into, well, how am I going to assemble the people, my virtual marketing department that's going to do this plan? We have our part-time person in-house. We have this agency we love. We have this webmaster. What are the right proportions of all these different people? How do we acquire all the sales-enabling technology and tools? We haven't talked very much about this, but one of the big changes in marketing over the years, it's become much more technical, and there are lots of tools, from Google Analytics to lots of other things, and that needs to be part of the mix here. And then once you sort of assembled your team, you have to integrate and manage them like a VP of marketing would do with a department, right? That's sort of the model here. And you want to manage, coordinate, and share the info among those agencies and your in-house folks, right? So there's good information flow and honest discussion and so on. That's the planning step. The next step is doing it, all right? And so the foundational changes are kind of one-time big things, like if you're going to change your brand, if you're changing your company positioning, if you're kind of redesigning things, you're changing some foundational things, there's a bunch of work to do to kind of build that out and change logos and things of that nature. A little bit more common, there's often one-time setup and configuration things one has to do when they're doing marketing. You couldn't see me, but I did air quotes there. Things like, redoing my website, redoing my social media sites, design direct mail piece, acquire a trade show booth. Okay, so kind of one-time setup things. And then the final bullet there, this happens all the time. On some basis, daily, monthly, quarterly, you do your marketing. You send out the emails, you go to your trade shows, you distribute your collateral, you do all those 9 different things, whatever makes sense for your plan, you do that that's a routine, that's what marketing is. The earlier 2 steps, depending on how big a change is, you might have to do those before, right? If you go to a new trade show and you want a new booth, you need the booth before you can go to the actual trade show. So the first 2 are sort of build steps, and the third one is sort of the ongoing day-to-day marketing. The check really nets out for marketing into analytics and benchmarking. So, our view is that marketing is complicated, as I said earlier. Growing sales and leads, it costs money in time and dollars. And so if you can't measure it, why are you doing it? The point of analytics is to answer these 2 critical questions. Where do our visitors' leads come from? And which of our marketing activities generated the visitor lead? And the idea is You want to do more of what's working and do less of what's not. And you could review this on a quarterly basis. If it's a bigger budget, maybe it's a monthly basis, could be even a weekly basis. A key thing to remember is there are 4 ways a lead or sale is generated. If you folks are like surfing the web and trying to get advice from blog posts or what have you about how to do analytics, you're going to get a lot of information about number 3, right? The web is all enchanted with the notion of people filling out a form on a website. That's what a lead is, right? Or with an e-commerce site, they'll buy it on the site. But for many, many businesses, number 1, in person, is the most important thing, and often web advice ignores that, right? So, a lead or sale in your store. I mean, you're a florist, you have an e-commerce site, but you still sell in your store, right? So how do I benchmark my marketing, not just my website, but also what's going on in my store, right? The second category is another one that's often forgotten, which is phone calls. People on a website, we had a client where 60% of the people who went to the Contact Us form, where they would see the ability to submit a form saying, hey, I'm a lead, call me back, right? 60% of the people who went to that Contact Us form ended up calling the phone number on the top of the page. They didn't actually fill in the form. So to a traditional web-based metric like Google Analytics, those 60% of the leads were completely invisible because Google Analytics doesn't know anything about them, right? So if you're making all these marketing investment decisions just on Google Analytics, you're potentially missing out on lots of important data like your in-person or phone call. And then, of course, the fourth one is email. And really, if you want to get a complete picture, you really have to track and analyze all 4 of those. The act step is pretty obvious. Based on the data, you want to make adjustments. So, paid marketing worked really well this quarter, so let's boost that 10%. You know what? That trade show was a bust. We're not going to go back to that trade show, so we can reduce in-person marketing by 10%. Email marketing, we're not going to change the budget. We can change the mix within it. We're going to not do as many newsletters, and we're going to start doing this other kind of email tactic called lead nurturing. The point here on this slide is it's not the case that you always have to go and ask for incremental new money. The whole idea here with agile integrated marketing is to spend your existing budget wisely. Use your data, get more efficient over time. So the same marketing dollars generates more and more for the company. So that's the overall view, and I'm sorry I'm racing along here, but let me quickly go through a quick commercial about Sales Renewal. So we have an online tool called Marketing Investment Analysis, Exit Planning Edition, and it's essentially the kind of thing we talked about earlier. It's an online survey, about 20 questions, where you kind of input the data you saw earlier, and it generates a report within 2 days, similar kind of graphics, but basically bottom line is to come back to you with the confidence of meeting your projected revenue goal. Normally, on our website, this is $250, but we're willing to offer it free to one randomly chosen attendee. The last slide of this deck has my email address. If you're interested, shoot me an email, and if we're overwhelmed, we'll randomly choose somebody to offer a free Marketing Investment Analysis XP edition. The Agile Integrated Marketing offering we call joint sourcing, okay? Joint sourcing is a contraction of joint venture plus insourcing. This first slide is the insourcing part of the joint sourcing story. And so the idea here is that Sales Renewal is a marketing general contractor. When Sales Renewal was started years ago, we observed home construction. And, if somebody was going to build their own house, they were unlikely to hire the plumber, the electrician, and the carpenter themselves. They're more likely to hire the architect to design the house and a general contractor to build it. And the GC would turn around and hire all the subcontractors and manage them and so on. That's really the model with Sales Renewal. We're a marketing general contractor. We'll work with you in the plan and what you need, and we'll turn around, and we call it insourcing, not outsourcing, because it's not outsourcing anything to India. In this case, we're trying to supplement. Your part-time marketing person, she'll stay, but we'll just bring in an ad agency. We'll bring in the SEO team, the web, whatever the pieces that make sense for your plan, we'll bring them in and then manage them. So Sales Renewal is the combination of a CMO, because we ourselves provide the strategic advice, with a VP of marketing, because we manage that team, including, if you'd like, your part-time marketing person, right? We'll manage your existing relationships if you'd like us to. And we'll have a boatload of sales enabling technology around benchmarking and so on. And importantly, we're soup to nuts responsible for this whole thing. It might seem like a cast of many characters, but you have a single accountable party to hold to this. Okay. The joint venture part is of joint sourcing is the fact that we share the risk and reward. So sharing the reward means we earn a percentage of revenue, a commission, even though we're marketing people. And just like with the sales team, the idea of giving us a commission is you're motivating us to grow your sales. You're getting a little piece of it to motivate us to grow your pie. Where we're quite unusual, actually we're the only company I know of in the world that does this, is we then take whatever that percentage we've agreed to on the revenue side, and we will pay that same percentage of the paid marketing that we recommend. Paid marketing is the thing that typically drives a marketing budget, all right? And so the idea here is you want to motivate us as the business owner to grow your sales, but you want to also motivate us to do so cost effectively because we're kicking in the money. And the kind of the secret sauce here is that it aligns our economic interests with the business owners. Unlike most marketing agencies who are paid by the hour, where they're incented to kind of work slowly, or worse, advertising, where they get 25% of the ad spend, where they're motivated to get you to spend more money on advertising. In our model, if we're earning a 5% commission, and we were to recommend a $5,000 per month ad campaign, not only do we not get 25% of that, we actually pay 5%. We pay that 5% level, $250 a month, right? And the key to that is when we're coming up with what's the right number, the 5,000, we will have sat there and figured out our incremental commission from the ads is X, our incremental cost of the ads is Y. If it's profitable for us, it's profitable for the client. That's what we mean by aligning our economic interest. And another way to think about this is a $250 equity-free investment in the client's business, hence the joint venture kind of name. By the way, there's no equity, but it's joint venture-like in terms of this economic alignment. So, done with the commercial, all right? So now in summary, for Agile integrated marketing. So the first bullet we talked about earlier, right? If you increased your revenue and you decreased your marketing expense in the year before the sale, you increase your sale price, you get a fantastic ROI. But there are a couple other things that also happen from this Agile integrated approach. Key to this integrated marketing is an understanding of your marketing metrics, right? It's a very data-driven, marketing-driven approach. So we will figure out, or the vendor you choose will figure out, the cost per lead per sale, the direct mail response rate, the ad click-through rate. Now put yourself in the shoes of your buyer. They're thinking about buying this company, and they've got a well-honed marketing machine. They've got a bunch of metrics that they could figure out, hey, if I put $100,000 more in marketing, here's my anticipated return. Because I'm reducing the buyer's risk, we can get a greater sale price. Related to that is this whole thing very much systematizes your marketing process. It defines the workflows. The PR team writes the press release. The SEO team go places it and things like that. It makes them very repeatable, again, very machine-like. Unlike the scenario in a lot of small businesses where marketing depends on the business owner or an individual. It's all in Joe's head. And if Joe leaves the company, what exactly are we buying? How do we know to market to people when Joe leaves, right? So because we've made all this systematic, again, we're reducing the buyer's risk, which will translate into a greater sales price. So those first three bullets are in general. The last bullet, if you are interested in the sales renewal model, we're not employees. We work under one-year contract. So the acquiring company has quite a few degrees of freedom. They could say, you sales renewal guys are great. They renew the contract. They could consolidate this new division with their existing division and have their existing marketing people work for the combined company. There's no layoffs. There's no issues like that, no risks. And so they have maximum flexibility with this kind of joint venture type model. So again, that translates into potentially a greater sales price. So here is the contact info I mentioned. And if we still have some time, I'd love to have some questions.
Great. Jane, do you want to take back your presentation, or do you want to go into Q&A?
Let's just go into Q&A, Rhonda.
Sure, absolutely. So we're going to just switch modes, folks, and then I'll explain to you how to ask a question. Okay, great. So now we're all in Q&A in case you have any questions for Keith or Jane. So if you'd like to ask a question, you are free to press *5. That will give us a notification that you'd like to ask a question, and then we will give you voice to ask a question. Alternately, if you'd like to send me a private chat, I'm happy to read that question for Keith or Jane.
Hey, Keith, while we're waiting, I wanted to ask you how you position your services to the existing marketing folks at your client site. Without, I can imagine some of them might get a little bit defensive possibly until they understand your model. But how do you work with them and how do you make them feel at ease?
That's a great question, Jane. So, we'll often report to either the business owner directly or perhaps a person who's got a title, VP Sales and Marketing. But generally, in smaller companies, it's that title might be Sales and Marketing, but it's probably very much a sales-driven organization. And, at a certain point, it's really inefficient. It's one of the reasons why companies often plateau out in revenue growth. If they grew based on their sales performance, at a certain point it becomes very inefficient to have a really good closer go to a networking meeting, spend 3 hours, and walk out with 2 business cards. That's the point where it really makes sense to bring in a professional marketing organization who could generate leads for the great closer to close. So sometimes, honestly, some VPs of sales and marketing might be threatened by this. That sometimes is addressed because we'll report to them. They manage us. And reporting to them is probably a good way to think about it. This kind of hybrid model here, joint sourcing is a 1-year contract. So it's sort of a reporting relationship as if we were employees, again, though we're not. When it comes to the actual individual contributors, generally, they're often thrilled. Because they're typically like the 1 or 2 marketing people in a sea of salespeople and other kind of skills. And again, because of all the changes in marketing, you can't keep up. It's impossible to keep up. So all of a sudden having a team that can share information, that can update their skills, who can provide some guidance, best practices, at least the better marketing people realize that this is a godsend. This is actually a good thing for my career. I'm going to be up to date and so on. So, there's always some person that it might be an issue, but generally we're pretty well received. Because again, we're insourcing, not outsourcing. The goal is not to replace that person, is to surround them with some missing expertise to make the overall company better.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. And there's so many different pieces to this. It's just not possible for them to be an expert in every area. You just can't do it. I remember as a business owner trying to manage all this myself. And the most intriguing thing I thought you said when I first met you was, I used to be a CEO and I found it so difficult to manage all of these different aspects. So it's terrific that you take that off the plate of the CEO to worry about how to coordinate all these different pieces. The CEO or the VP of business development.
That's exactly right. And that's why the business model becomes very important. It's a team that's not paid by the hour. It's this shared risk reward model. So, in a big company, the CEO does not sit on every marketing team meeting, right? No, there's some kind of reporting relationship, weekly, daily, monthly, whatever it is. The VP marketing reports to the CEO, and that's the way the CEO is monitoring. That still happens in what we're talking about here, but we handle the day-to-day, and you just get to be involved in making the ultimate decisions and setting strategic direction, and then we benchmark ourselves against this data and the budget and so on.
Yeah, that's excellent. I just love the fact that you'll take a risk along with the client to make sure that it succeeds.
Exactly.
I think that's
so we do actually have a comment and a question. I think we're at about 12:59, so I'll be quick. The comment question is, thanks for all the information, Keith. Realistically, if you're looking about exiting, how long would it take to implement this kind of comprehensive marketing/sales plan?
It's really going to be a function of the specifics of the company. As I mentioned earlier, Sales Renewal is kind of new to the exit planning space, and I went to my first couple of meetings, and I was kind of surprised how heavily skewed all the advisors were to the transaction. And in hindsight, I understood why that was. But no, if they're doing the deal, we're not going to move the revenue needle. right? And so it's really a question of, are they looking for a small change? Well, that can be done quicker. If they're looking for a very dramatic change, well, it just takes time. You're not going to double your growth rate in 1 year, right? So part of the answer to that is how big a gap is there from where they are, where they want to be. Marketing, like a lot of things in business, is compounding. So time is on our side. We generally would say kind of the minimum would probably be on the order of 2 years. Let's put it this way. Joint sourcing, the program I mentioned, was not designed for the exit planning space. So every client who talks to sales renewal, every CEO, every owner, they want to grow their business, right? So it's a general program. We could do that for 30 years. We're only 7 years old, but one will hope. But I would say to really be able to move the needle, to put into place the kind of processes and statistics we talked about. And then the other part of that is the buyer's perception. If we've increased the revenue for 6 months, are they going to trust that? Is that enough of a ramp for them to believe it and pay more for the company? Do they need to see 2 years of revenue or 1 year of revenue before they're comfortable? So it's sort of a complicated answer, but I would think the minimum is kind of 2 years. The maximum could be anything.
Thanks, Keith.
Sure.
Okay. And this person who asked the question says thank you. I don't see any further
You're
questions. Welcome. So, Jane, would you like us to just finish up with your quick slide, or just
sure. Actually, I don't even need a slide, Rhonda. Keith,
okay,
Keith's contact information is on. My contact information is jane@businesstransitionacademy.com. Keith, thank you so much for being a guest presenter today. We really appreciate it.
My
the
pleasure.
more information we can provide to our owners and advisors, the better on this exit planning topic. So thanks very much, everybody. We will follow up with you, send you the slides, and we will also post a recording of this webinar in case you want to watch the webinar again within probably the next 5 to 7 days. So thanks.